Good morning, dear listener. Welcome, my friends. I want to tell you a story today, and I promise the misty, murdery scenery where I'm in will make sense in just a second. But as all great stories do, this one starts with me talking to a girl. It was about 5 years ago in my university town in Maastricht. And I spoke to her. We were talking about how we grew up, because Maastricht is a very international university. You have people from all over the world who come to study there. And so it's always, well, you never know where people are from. And this girl told me that she grew up in the US, she grew up in South America, she grew up in Belgium for part of her life. And she had lived in all these different places. And it made me feel kind of simple, kind of dull, because all I had to say was, well, I grew up in Belgium. I've lived here, I've lived in Belgium for almost the entirety of my life, up until this point. So saying, well, you've been to all these countries, and I went to primary school here, I went to secondary school here, and I live, 40 minutes away from this university, when she had this exciting life, made me seem kind of simple. This was a repeated interaction that I had, because people were from all over the place. And again, time and again, I thought, well, did I miss out on anything? And it made me feel lacking, like I missed out on something by coming from a small town and not having lived in multiple countries and not had these crazy experiences. And it was for the longest time that I didn't know what to do with that feeling, right? And I'm not sure exactly when I realized it, but at some point I noticed that many of these people didn't really know where their roots were. They didn't know where they belonged if everything else came crashing down. And that's when I realized that I know exactly where I come from. I know exactly where my roots are. I know a place where I can always return to, and everybody will know me. Everybody knows my name, and everybody knows the people around me, and I will feel at home here. I will always feel safe here. I will always feel like I belong. And if everything I ever try to do breaks down into pieces and my life falls apart, well, I know where to go. And I think this is incredibly valuable. I have so many memories attached to this place right here that this is invaluable. And this security that it gives me is something that I now, only after realizing it, that this is something that not everyone has, come to deeply, deeply value. And another thing that sort of living, in a small town will do, or it's just a consequence of that, is that all my family is here. Like, I actually calculated it for a presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago. Over 80% of my extended family, so brothers and sisters of my parents, live in a very small town, which means I get to see them so much. I get to see my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and my cousins. I get to see them so much whenever I'm here. And the more I talk with people, the more people I get to know, the more I realize how precious this is and what a blessing it is that I get to see them this much, and that I get to interact with them, and that I know always where I can come back to. But the point I'm trying to make here is larger than this, because the fundamental shift I made was not only realizing how incredible the place is where I grew up, but fundamentally I focused on what I had instead of what I didn't have, right? And you always have this choice with, every day. You can focus your attention and your energy and your mind, your thoughts. You can focus them on things you don't have or things you do have. And whatever of those you choose, it will fundamentally change your mood and your approach to life. You can always focus on the things you're lacking and on the things you would want to achieve and you would like to have. But you can also, and this is important, right? Because it drives you forward to achieve great things and to make the things happen that you want to have happen. But if you never look here, if you never look to the things that you know are working for you, that are good in your life, and these can be very small things, if you never look at them, well, then you're never going to find joy in the moment and never going to make peace with what has happened. And I think this is a very important shift that I've made and that I've noticed in myself. I noticed it very profoundly when I was traveling in New Zealand, and like everyone who has traveled for a bit of an extended period of time will know that you meet a lot of people and they all tell you where they traveled, and they say, oh, you've got to go to Patagonia, you got to go to Tasmania, you got to go to Romania, whatever. And soon you have like this list of places that you need to see, and you're like, okay, I want to see them all, but I can't travel the entire world in a year. And you get all caught up in fucking travel FOMO because you're like, oh, I kind of want to see these places and I want to experience what they tell me about. But at some point you realize that if you all keep focusing on what you don't have, what you haven't seen yet, you're never going to arrive. And I noticed that in a very specific moment. I was talking to an old New Zealander in the mountains of New Zealand, in a mountain hut. He was about 70 years old, and he was part of a hiking group that hiked to this hut where we were. And I asked him, have you ever been here? Because it was this beautiful, magnificent place. And he's like, no, never been here. And I thought, okay, if there's a guy who grew up in New Zealand, who has lived in this country for 70 years, and even he hasn't seen everything there is to see in that country, then I don't need to pressure myself into feeling bad about not visiting everything. And then I took a moment and I thought about all the things that I had already seen on my travels and all the things that I had experienced. And suddenly I felt like all warm inside. And like, oh, this is such an amazing feeling. You know, all the things that I already got to experience. This is so amazing. And this is just the same shift, right? It's the same shift. It's instead of focusing on things you don't have, think about things you do have. This is the fundamental shift. And it's been one that has been very powerful in my life in terms of finding joy every day, but also in terms of being appreciative of the big things that might differentiate my life from others, but that I come to cherish when I really think about what it means for me. So if you take one thing away, focus on what you have instead of what you don't, more than you currently do. You're never gonna focus on what you have only, because then you're never gonna be pulled towards achieving something new, and that'd probably be, I don't know, sort of boring, I guess. But I think we focus a lot on what we don't have. And so shifting that balance a bit might just make you enjoy the journey towards where you want to go a bit more. And by the way, I am here at the highest point in Belgium. It is a phenomenal 693 meters high, I think. And the sun is rising over there, which is very pretty. And a fun fact about Belgium, the highest point behind me is 693 meters, I think, but they wanted to get to 700, so they built a staircase to get to 700. That's Belgium. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next week.